Good morning, everybody. My name is Connor Flanagan. I'm the Director of Education here at the Southampton History Museum. And this morning we are joined by our Research Center Manager, Mary Cummings, for the 10th in the High Style and the Gilded Age series. If many of you have been to any other lectures, you'll know how in-depth these are and how well they're researched. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to Mary. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the chat bar or the Q&A function on Zoom, and we will answer them all at the end. Enjoy.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me for this talk on Grace Clarke Newton. There is mystery and romance in Grace Clarke Newton's story, though as the daughter of the noted collector Thomas B. Clarke, who was a close friend of Stanford White and a popular man about town, her path to a good marriage and a privileged life in New York society seems foreordained. When the Clarks move into the elegant Georgian townhouse with its medieval bow windows, a Stanford White design, their residence at 22 East 35th Street is duly noted in the social register, along with Thomas Clark's memberships in all the right clubs. As one of Clark's 4 beloved daughters and sole son, Grace seems headed for a life without drama. Grace's mother, the former Fanny Eugenia Morris, hails from a distinguished family, and her marriage to Thomas Benedict Clarke in 1871 is no doubt applauded by family and friends. Clarke combines an astute business sense with an artistic sensibility, and he moves easily in New York society. Having started out as a manufacturer of laces and linens, he moves on to become a dealer in Chinese porcelain. He was J.P. Morgan's porcelain advisor. And then he rose in the art world to be the country's foremost collector of contemporary American art. In the small world of New York City aesthetes, artists, men of letters, and wealthy bohemians, Clarke and the celebrated architect Stanford White were destined to become close friends. White is among the high living circle of artists and wealthy patrons who come and go at 22 East 35th Street, enjoying the Clark's hospitality in the elegant home that White designed for his friend Tommy at no charge. In a letter written to White expressing their delight in their exquisite townhouse, the Clarks write, "Your genius and taste is everywhere shown in our beautiful house." And here we have a bedroom fit for the renowned collector and his wife. The walls are surely hung with selections from Thomas Clark's unrivaled collection of paintings by American artists, which as early as 1878 included such giants as George Inness, Albert Bierstadt, Frederick Church, and William Merritt Chase. By then, Clarke had already amassed 185 paintings, among which 170 were by American artists. Grace is no longer a child when the family moves into the highly distinctive townhouse, but there's never been a time when she has not been surrounded by art and artists. She seems to have been relatively free of parental pressure to hone the skills of a good wife and socialite, and she was encouraged to pursue her talent for writing stories and poetry. Much later, some of her many stories written in those early years are discovered and collected under the heading A Small Girl's Stories. A note accompanying the collection identifies them as having been written when she was a small girl of 11 years of age. Thomas Clarke is apparently a fond father and husband, but like many men of his class, he's known to straddle the line between the world of New York's smart society and that of the bohemian artists whose parties and amorous adventures are likely known, though not acknowledged by others, including their wives. In the Gilded Age, it's generally accepted that privileged men will gather together for revels that exclude the inhibiting presence of their wives. In this illustration, the carousing at a stag banquet for one of their number is well underway. The bald Thomas Clarke can be seen seated facing the camera next to the bearded Augustus Saint-Ogens. When Stanford White holds a luncheon for four at the start of his infamous affair with the showgirl Evelyn Nesbit, Thomas Clarke arrives with another showgirl, Elsie Ferguson. To Nesbit, who was then just 16, Clarke looked as old as Methuselah, but she notices how very attentive he is to Elsie. Later, when White is forced to give up the lease on the elaborate hideaway where the luncheon takes place, Clarke agrees to share the rental of a more modest space for secret meetings. Grace is no doubt in the dark about her father's double life, and indeed her own behavior seems to align effortlessly with what is expected of her. Until it doesn't. In 1900, Grace does something that shocks society, upends her family's plans for her, and suggests a passionate and perhaps impulsive nature. According to press reports that were preserved in the archives of the Social Register, Grace, a guest on a cruise board aboard a yacht owned by Edwin Gould, son of robber baron Jay Gould, catches the eye of one Harry Wakefield Bates, who is immediately smitten. A socially prominent Bostonian, Bates is also an athlete of renown, having had a sensational career pitching for the Harvard baseball team. Oops. After college, Bates buys into the once widely circulated Godey's magazine with hopes of reversing its shrinking readership. But the magazine continues to lose ground, and when it ceases publication in 1896, Bates moves on to a variety of more profitable ventures. Alerted to high romance on the high seas, the newspapers report that Bates has fallen madly in love with Miss Clarke, that he urges his suit with ardor, and soon has Miss Clarke's promise to be his wife. He and Grace are secretly married in New York at the Church of St. Mary the Virgin on June 19, 1900, the only witness being a friend of Mr. Bates. Immediately after the ceremony, Grace's parents are alerted by telephone. Taken completely by surprise, they leave their East Hampton country home, the Lanterns, for the city. Hints of a stormy scene appear in the society press, but the next day, Grace's parents host a wedding breakfast at the very fashionable Delmonico's on Fifth Avenue, making the best of matters, as the Boston Globe reports. Then the newlyweds leave for a wedding trip along the coast of Massachusetts and beyond on the groom's yacht, the Gleam. All appears well on their return until late August, when something happens between Grace and the love-struck Mr. Bates that abruptly breaks up the marriage. Only much later will some light be shed on the reasons for Grace's sudden retreat, alone, to the Lanterns in East Hampton. Rumors that she will seek an annulment are followed by reports that she has been taken ill with what appears to be nervous prostration. A social directory advisory notes that letters to Grace are to be sent to the Metropolitan Club, care of her parents, suggesting that she may be convalescing in a treatment center and that there has been a parental intervention. It's interesting to note that press coverage of the titillating affair invariably opens by identifying Grace as the daughter of Mr. Thomas B. Clarke, the well-known art collector. Apart from her father, she seems to have no identity of her own in the eyes of the press. Recovery is apparently slow, as is the passage through legal channels of the case for ending the marriage. A suit filed in October 1900 comes before the fat and ponderous Judge James Fitzgerald in April 1901. 5 years later, Fitzgerald will preside over a much more sensational trial when Thomas Clarke's good friend Stanford White is murdered by Evelyn Nesbitt's jealous husband. In the Bates divorce case, press reports are so discreet that Grace's complaint remains a mystery. Claims that Bates had been married before and divorced are made and denied by Bates's lawyer. Testimony from doctors, apparently at the crux of the matter, is deemed inadmissible. Letters, affidavits, and all documents presented as evidence in the trial are read only by the judge. The public, avid for an explanation, has to be satisfied with Grace's claim that Bates had no right to marry her. The trial ends with more confusion as Judge Fitzgerald denies Grace's motion for the annulment, and a headline in the New York Sun declares, "Bates a husband still." At some point, Grace is returned to health and ready to put her romantic debacle behind her. But she's not heard the last of the man she would most like to forget. In 1904, Maybelle Courtney, identified in the press as a stage beauty, makes headlines when she sues Harry Bates for $10,000, alleging breach of his 1902 promise to marry her. Bates makes the laughable claim that he was still married in 1902 and so couldn't possibly have made such a promise. He is, in fact, reported to have filed for divorce from Grace in October 1903 on grounds of desertion, while Maybelle claims she was never told he was married. When he fails to set a date, Maybelle runs out of patience, and Bates finds himself prosecuting a divorce libel at the same time he is defending an action for breach of promise. The press loves the story, a gift that never stops giving, until a Harvard bulletin reports that after a lingering illness, Harry Wakefield Bates dies on December 12, 1904, thus putting an end to his tangled romantic affairs, pulling the plug on Maybelle's suit, and setting Grace free. With her health restored, Grace goes on to recover her equilibrium. Happy again in the Clarkes' cheerful East Hampton home, decorated with ship's lanterns from around the world. The Clarkes are enthusiastic members of the so-called horsey set out in the country. They join other fashionable spectators at polo matches, at fancy horse shows where polished equestrians compete, and they cheer on the fox hunters who thrill to the chase. The Lanterns is known as a convivial gathering place for hunt breakfasts, and in this lively society, Grace is courted by a prince of equestrian royalty, the tall, handsome master of hounds and renowned artist of hunting scenes, Scenes and Horses, Richard Newton, Jr. The Newtons boast a long history on eastern Long Island. Richard's father, the Reverend R. Heber Newton, built a summer cottage on the dunes near Georgica Pond in 1888. He was a superstar clergyman in New York until charges of, quote, entertaining liberal religious views led to his resignation in 1902. Young Richard Newton's summers are spent at the beachfront cottage, acquiring the equestrian skills that are expected of a young man of his class, and benefiting as an aspiring painter from the exposure to East Hampton's artist colony. Among his neighbors in East Hampton are Robert and Amanda Sewell, determinedly bohemian artists who like to shake up the neighborhood with their plein air painting sessions using nude models. After the Sewells take off for Morocco, Richard and his brother Francis spend several months in 1893 as their house guests in Tangier. That same year, as a 21-year-old with some private means, Richard purchases a house in Hayground and becomes a leading member of the local hunt club. In 1902, he establishes the Suffolk Hunt Club, eventually leasing the house to the club. World War I puts a temporary stop to the club's activities. Then after the war, it is revived, but relocates. By then, the property is owned by Thomas B. Clarke, who purchased the property in 1917 to make it his summer home, which he calls Lindenland. Throughout the club's existence, Richard Newton serves as its master of foxhounds. When Richard's brother Francis purchases Fulling Mill Farm in East Hampton, the brothers are recognized as leaders not just of the hunt, but of hunt society. In addition to the elaborate hunt breakfast, there are race meets and other festive occasions that attract fashionable spectators dressed to the nines. Yet for elegance, it's hard to outshine the riders in full regalia. British tradition dictates black boots with brown tops, white breeches, canary yellow vests, and scarlet coats for those talented enough to have earned the right to wear them. And while Richard is at the top of his game as a sportsman, he's also making a name for himself as a remarkably gifted equestrian artist. Tall, sporty, yet natty, Richard Newton, like Grace, reveals depths that would surprise anyone who knows him only as the gentleman sportsman who leads the hunt and paints with precision. Those who know a different Richard include the author of a hunt memoir, who claims Richard's violent temper was revealed to her one day when he gave a sound thrashing to a farmer who had strung a wire across his field. She also repeated a tale of the legendary courage after he and his horse fell into an abandoned well. Rescued only after he and the horse had spent 3 days at the bottom of the well, he's said to have appeared at a dance that very night, offering no comment on what he termed a trifling accident. Richard's prowess on horseback, his artistic talent, and the dazzling impression he makes in his scarlet hunting attire must have been irresistible to Grace, who also surely appreciated that they share artistic sensibilities and depths of character that have little to do with their obvious social graces. In January 1905, a headline in the Kansas City Star announces the marriage of Mrs. Grace Clarke Bates to the Reverend Dr. Heber Newton's son, Richard, with the headline, "An artist her second choice." It hardly seems the kindest slant on the marriage, which takes place at 22 East 35th Street, with Reverend Heber Newton officiating before the couple's immediate relatives. The Star seizes the opportunity to dredge up the whole sad saga of Grace's first marriage, which makes better copy than what would prove to be the happiest of unions for the next 10 years. Subsequent editions of the Social Register list Mr. and Mrs. Richard Newton Jr. as residing with her parents in New York, though it is Box Farm, the Newton shingled cottage and watermill on the corner opposite the Suffolk Cubs' original headquarters, which surely inspired this blissful reminiscence written by Grace. After this run, which was one of the most beautiful I ever saw, Dick riding Tornado, I came back here, lit the lamps, got tea ready, and then when Dick rode in, he saw the light shining from our own little house. He blew a salute on his hunting horn, and in his pink coat came home to tea. It is a memory long, no ever to be cherished. Grace never stops writing poetry, but she's also the author of the charming A Hunting Alphabet, which appears with illustrations by her husband. Then, in October 1915, the Newtons' seemingly magical married life comes to an end when Grace, still a young woman, dies after what the local press identifies as a lingering illness. Her husband is devastated, and for her parents, who have lost the last of their 4 daughters to early deaths, it's a crushing blow. Immediately following Grace's death, the grief-stricken Richard Newton edits and arranges for limited publication some of his wife's poetry in a collection that he illustrates. The result is a volume called Poems in Passing, which includes this particularly poignant poem. Canter far and free, gallop fast and fleet, 'neath the dreamland tree we shall meet, my sweet. In another memorial to Grace, Richard joins with his mother-in-law, Fanny Clarke, to make a sizable donation in Grace's name to Southampton Hospital, earmarked for an addition to the X-ray department in the 3-year-old building. Grace's story ends here, but you may be interested to know what happened afterward to those whose lives she touched. Thanks to an idea hatched by Grace's romantically impulsive first husband, Harry Wakefield Bates, brokers' offices throughout the nation are able to have complete ticker tape service on site, an innovation that accounts for the huge fortune he leaves at his death. Stage beauty, Elsie Ferguson, the obvious object of Thomas Clarke Sr.'s affection years earlier at Stanford White's luncheon, marries the Clarks' only remaining offspring, Thomas Clarke Jr., in 1916. Not the first time in this Gilded Age series that a father's mistress has moved on to his son. Richard Newton, made a widower in 1916 at Grace's death, remarries twice. His 1918 marriage to Mildred Gautier Rice is dissolved in 1922, and 10 years later, he marries the much younger Blanche Hellier, who survives him by 24 years. When she dies in 1993, she wills Box Farm to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which finds a suitable purchaser in 1995. When the new owners move in, they discover several leather-bound copies of Grace Clarke's A Small Girl's Stories and Poems in Passing. Before his death in 1931, Thomas Clarke Sr. transforms his New York residence into an art gallery. And today, 22 East 35th Street is the home of the Collectors Club, a private society whose members are avid collectors, not of art, but of stamps. And that is really the end.
Well, great job there, Mary. Hopefully everybody enjoyed today's talk. Somewhat of a downer. Then again, kind of most of these stories always kind of end on somewhat of a downer. So again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to submit them in the chat function or through the Q&A. I'll read through them and ask them all to Mary right now. So somebody just in the chat just said, thank you, so good. Not so much a question, but.
Well, thank you.
And then let's see. Okay, so somebody that was in the call earlier did have to walk away, but they were curious. Let's see, I got called away for a minute and had, did anyone ever reveal the cause of the failure of Grace Clarke's first marriage? And if you didn't cover that in the talk, do you have a theory about it?
To my knowledge, it's never actually been explained. And I don't know, this lingering illness seemed to cover everything when someone died back then, but it's not clear, although I think the problem was definitely with Bates, and he was not honest with her when they married. That is what I think.
So somewhat standard marital issues, probably nothing too out of the ordinary.
Right, unless he just outright lied to her, because I do believe he had been married previously, and she didn't know that.
Yeah.
So there's a possible explanation, but that's really a little vague.
Gotcha. So let's see, we had a few more people in the chat all saying thank you, great program. And someone said the old photos are especially fascinating. To get a better look at any of the images in here, on Tuesday, the recording of this talk will be posted to our blog, along with the written out text and all the better images, so you can get a better look maybe at some of the ones you might have liked more. Let's see. Did Grace have any children?
No
No
children. Yeah, and he never had, he got married twice, 3 times, but he had no children either.
Gotcha. Was 78 Mecox Road purchased by Jimmy Breslin or a member of his family?
Possibly, I don't know.
Not sure. Okay. And then someone asking if Grace had any siblings, but at the end you did say she had some sisters, right?
She was one of 4 daughters, and they all died young. And she had a brother who married his father's mistress, former mistress.
An interesting family dynamic, to say the least. Let's see. Does anybody else have any last questions before we end today's call? If so, speak now or forever hold your peace. Or I guess you could send us an email. Let's see. One last one we have here. I wasn't sure if you had mentioned, but was Grace an equestrian herself?
She did ride. I read that once. She shared her husband's enthusiasm for all the activities, equestrian activities, but I don't think she was on the hunt.
Okay. We had a couple more questions coming in. People, I guess, weren't done yet. Let's see. We have, are the Austen Clarks descendants of this family?
Not that I know of.
Okay. And is the home in New York City designated a historic site?
It must be. It's a, Stanford White building, and it's still there.
Gotcha. I'll say I don't see any of those standard sort of blue placards outside the building anywhere, at least in this photo.
Right.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
Yeah.
Are there any tours of the Collectors Club now?
You need to go to their website, which I did. I didn't notice whether they had tours or whether you can just walk in. I don't know, but you could. It will be easy to find out.
I imagine nowadays, with everything going on, it might be somewhat more difficult to get
Yeah,
a tour.
true.
But
You
I would
can't
definitely suggest
walk
calling.
in anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. What happened to Clark's paintings? Were they sold or donated to a museum somewhere?
They are scattered. There is an equestrian museum that has a lot of them, and there's a book about him called with Brush and Bridle, where a lot of them are. You can see them in the book, and we have it in our library. Yeah, I don't know the name of that museum or the location, but there is one that's just devoted to equestrian art.
All right. Well, I guess I was wrong before. People did have some more questions, but things seem to have petered out now. Again, this was another great talk, Mary. A lot of great questions from everybody that joined us today. Be sure to visit our website, southamptonhistory.org, and sign up for a mailing list if you're not already on it. Check out all of our future programs going on. And then remember, on Tuesday, the blog will be posted on our website with this talk's video recording. So you can share that to anybody who might have missed it today. And you can get a better look at the text and all the images that were included in today's talk. So again, I want to thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
And have a good day, everybody. Bye.